Hi, everyone. Thank you all so much for joining today's out-of-home office hours session. I'm Brian Shopper, Marketing Manager here at Geopath. Also on the line, we have EVP of Marketing, Scott Fiaschetti. We're very excited to help kick off the return of the out-of-home office hours series today. Today, we're joined by Geopath Chairperson and Kinetic CEO US, Michael Lieberman, and Geopath President Dylan Mabin. In today's webinar, Michael and Dylan will talk about Geopath's new strategic vision, and more specifically, the ways that came to be, how it'll be rolled out, and what this means for innovation in the industry. If you have any questions during your session today, please submit them through the Q&A tool in Zoom rather than chat. Scott will be tracking the questions on the back end and moderating at the end of the session as time permits. So with all that being said, I'm going to hand this over to Michael and Dylan.
There we go. Thank you, Brian. And there's Michael. Hello, Michael.
Hi, Dylan. How you doing?
I'm doing very well. How are you today?
I'm good. I'm good. It's a fun day.
Yeah, last week of summer.
See, you just made it less fun.
I know.
That's not a place to go at the start of this.
Womp womp. So how has your summer been? It's been a little over 3 months since we were all down in Florida at the Geopath AAA conference. What have you been up to?
A lot. It's been busy, right? I mean, hopefully everyone's gotten a chance to get some personal time and enjoy the summer. I feel like it's been a lot harder the last few years to really get the separation, but I hope everyone has, and I certainly have tried. And then on the professional front, it hasn't been summer. It's just been never ending go, 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 which is absolutely fantastic and incredible. I think as an industry, it's probably as good or better than we'd all hoped it would be. And for that reason, I'm truly grateful. It's beyond a comeback. How's yours?
That's great to hear. It's been intense. It's been a lot of fun. We're getting a lot of stuff accomplished that we set out to do. But yeah, it's been a wild, a very busy summer. Kicking off stuff with the strategic vision work. Just getting everyone back into the office too. We had been away from the office for a long time, so you can see. I'm not sure if anyone's been to the Geopath office, but we did some remodeling, a little fresh paint on the walls. I'm using the headset because there's a lot of echo in here because we got rid of a lot of the clutter, but now there's a lot of echo problems. So
good. So for everyone out there, if you haven't spoken to Dylan recently, every time I talk to him, the question is how you're doing, and his answer is, "There's a lot going on." Kind of a lot like today, with it's intense.
Yeah,
which is a good thing.
It is a really good thing.
We have a lot to do, good. So it's good. There's a lot going on.
Yeah, like you said with your business, it's good problems to have. A lot of people are looking to us to get a lot of work done, and we're doing everything we can to get it done and get it done faster and scale up and stabilize things. So it's nice. Yeah.
This is our first fireside chat, so
without the fire.
Without the fire, I know. We'll make it a fire pit chat next time. It'll be outside. It'll be end of summer. It'll be gorgeous.
Yeah, fall. We'll do a fall series.
I love it. Get the fall colors. So do we jump right in?
Let's do it.
You want to? Let's do it. All right. So I'm actually going to start asking the questions on this one because I think it's, given that you're the one who's it's intense and it's a lot of work, it's important for everyone to hear from your point of view exactly what is going on and why we're doing it. So now, you already referenced on this call the vision project. I think a lot of people who are close to Geopath understand what this vision project is and entailed. But the reality is, if you're not too close, or if you haven't been in board meetings or in constant sessions or attended any of the numerous other speaking engagements that you've done to get the word out, can you just give us a little background? What was this vision project? What did we do? What did you do?
Sure. Yeah, so it all started back early 2021. There was a handful of reasons that it got kicked off, but use probably the most obvious one, which was that the pandemic sort of shed a light on the fact that our industry was caught on its heels. Frankly, everyone was, so we shouldn't feel bad about it, on just the rapid change that happened. And, you know, March of 2020, I'm feeling a little busy right now. March of 2020 was a very busy month as well. So everyone's calling saying, what's going on right now? What's going on right now? And we didn't have a perfect answer for many people. We found out how to get that answer very quickly, but it took a lot of effort and a lot of long days and early mornings. But what it really was that the organization, you know, we've been around since 1934, and we realized that our constituency was changing, evolving. The media channels that we're competing against are evolving, and we need to make sure that we fit into that, and also we're getting our fair share of everything. So looking at how the landscape was changing, looking at some of the challenges of our organization. Again, we're a not-for-profit trade organization that has a data service product that we provide. I joke when we talk to people that are joining Geopath for the first time, or tech partners or whomever, that we're a 90-plus-year-old non-for-profit tech startup, and their immediate reaction was like, that sounds like a terrible idea. And
we joke here that the out-of-home industry is a 200-year-old startup. So
exactly.
You're halfway there.
Yeah, so we've got the experience, which is great, because the fact that everyone called us in March of 2022 and said, what's going on, that meant that people are looking to us to have that answer. So that was reassuring. And so we're really, the vision is, okay, with those needs that people are looking to Geopath to answer, what are they? So first we went back to with all the groups. We surveyed lots of folks. We had task force and working groups with all different swaths of our constituency, from agency to platforms to brands. Everyone, large, medium, small, get involved. And really the first question was like, what is out of home? Forget Geopath. What does out of home as an industry channel need to succeed? And then, okay, in that vision of what the out-of-home industry needs to succeed, what are the places that Geopath should be playing and has the authority and understood role to satisfy those things? Where are we best fit? So the imperatives for the industry that we really distilled it down into 4 things. One was standards and definitions. You know, if you're aware, the MRC has out-of-home standards. We're trying to fit with the omni-channel. There's only a certain number of words, and everyone's been using different words for the same thing, or the same word for different things. And so we need to address that. And that's a challenge. So we need to get standards and definition correct. So we're working with the MRC and the ARF and other groups to make sure that that's all moving forward. The second one was a universal inventory database. And this one sounds simple. Conceptually, it's, we just need a map of all the inventory, but it is where we have been focusing for decades on making sure that there is an audit of all of, going back to the Traffic Audit Bureau for Media Measurement. We need to make sure we know exactly what inventory is where, and whose is it, how large is it, what directions it's facing. Now, some of those things, that sort of metadata that we collect about the physical attributes, is necessary for us to provide audience measurement, which was the third imperative, which was there needs to be a consistent base level audience measurement across all out of home. That includes roadside, street furniture, place-based media, rolling stock media. We need to be able to use those same definitions to be able to compare all media and be able to roll them all up together for within out-of-home media aggregation, reach, and frequency, and for omni-channel purposes to understand how it fits within everything else. And then the last one was interoperability, that whatever data's out there, whatever systems are out there, whatever media networks are out there, everything needs to be connected. The day of passing back and forth spreadsheets it's not sustainable. Business is quick. We need to respond. Systems need to be able to be connected through APIs or whatever it may be, which again gets back to good standards and definitions and protocols. So all of these things need to exist. And for Geopath, the question was, okay, where does Geopath fit within all of those needs? What should we do? What should we not do? What are we responsible? What are we not responsible for?
So Dylan, I'm gonna jump in for 1 second. So just to give you sort of the agency buying context on a lot of what you just said, right? We get into 2020, pardon the expression, the shit hits the fan. And we realize that our numbers are not as responsive as an industry as we need them to be. They can't move to dramatic changes. And, to some degree, I think a lot of the response, even outside of our industry to the pandemic was, I think someone once called it a failure of imagination, right? You imagine the big things, you imagine little things, but this was not one that anyone gathered in terms of what it would do and how it would impact our industry. So we weren't prepared there, but we weren't flexible enough to respond. We needed to figure out a bit of a more flexible solution. At the same time, and I think really coming to prominence on the same occasion, and because of it, the idea that automated and programmatic buying allowed us to be much more flexible. You could get in, you could get out, you could respond to the changes in consumer traffic, but now you have automated trading. And to your point on an inventory solution, if the IDs don't match, if what you're selling and what you're buying don't add up, if there's no way to connect the dots, how do you actually know what you're getting? How are you able to be an informed buyer? How are you able to ensure that you are doing right by your brands? Right now, at the backdrop of all this, while we're addressing those concerns, you look at the fragmenting of TV, what's going on there, how you have multiple different partners. Then you look at our industry where we have Geopath, we have ComScore, we have Epicenter, we have multiple new forms of measurement, whether it's Street Metrics, whoever else. And I'm sorry for anyone I didn't name check who I know you're out there and didn't get to. But there is no one currency anymore. And I think that was to some degree a Geopath luxury for a lot of years. But now we're looking at an ecosystem where there are many new players. We need to be more responsive. We need to be more flexible in how the numbers are gauged and come out in a cadence. We need to better understand how these systems talk to each other. And oh, by the way, there's not going to be one form of measurement. So for Geopath to just be a currency kind of misses what the industry needs. And I think that gets back to something that I kind of want to hit on before you keep going. Geopath is an industry organization, right? The goal is not simply provide a set of metrics or provide X. It goes back to that question you started with. What does the industry need from Geopath, and what is it Geopath is capable of providing back? And I think that was a big starting point question that led to those four, I think it was 4 categories you just mentioned of what does the industry need, and then how can Geopath try to provide those solutions, right? That's, from my standpoint, it was like world changing in 2020. We knew there were some issues before with this or that, or we knew we'd have to move forward in a different way. But in just a couple of months, everything went into really stark relief.
Yeah, and I think that's a reality of the industry's future, is that there are going to be multiple companies, multiple sources of information that are either audience measurement itself or other media measurement tools that are all going to help answer the questions of clients. And I think that was another really important thing that Geopath needs to be able to provide a baseline across as much as possible, so there is that comparability. But there will always be other solutions that are popping up. Everyone has the right to have their own first-party measurement if they're trying to understand their own signal of what their business is. That's a reality. What we need to do as an organization is make sure that our baseline is as best in class as can possibly be, and continuing to iterate on that, and continue to evolve that, but then continue to work with all of those competitors in the space and there are people that are out there that are providing measurement of in some sorts, but they look to Geopath to audit inventory. I mean, that's one of the most obvious ones. We don't need to duplicate that work. And so if that's Geopath's role, everyone's agree, align, okay, Geopath, you do this. Geopath, you do audience measurement. Campaign performance measurement, that's not something that Geopath is going to get into. We're not going to do attribution, but we have data that can flow into attribution, but we don't have, sales data. We don't have that. That agencies are going to have that. The media companies are going to have that with their clients, or the clients are going to have that. They're not going to give it to anyone. So they're the only ones that can answer that question. But people are definitely looking to us to be that common denominator to build all those pieces together. And if we're going to try, I think this was the other big takeaway. If we're going to try to fit into the omni-channel, we need to do it in one united front, because the omni-channel mix of, well, this process and this process and this process and this process, it's going to slow adoption. Or there may be one, but it'll be very limited in scope of what it can measure. And so then the utility doesn't help address the larger out-of-home ecosystems challenges.
Yep. And if anyone out there didn't notice the little air quotes that Dylan used when he said competitors, I think that's another big change, right? So throw the word away, in fact, like the hell with the air quotes, throw the word competitors away. Again, it goes back to your interoperability point. How do we make sure that someone who sits in Kinetic seat, in my team's seat, and wants to understand how to combine A, B, C, and D as out-of-home channels, when all of them are using a different form of currency, that's a role where Geopath can play. It can figure out how to line up those metrics, how to put together a reach frequency across 4 different forms of impression measurement, whatever those might be. It can be an informing platform. So it can say, here is your view shed. This is what we're looking at. Here's how to determine the count as you're going through. It can be all these pieces around it. But I want to be clear, Geopath's not a competitor at this point. And maybe I think that's a bit of a mind shift from where people thought about Geopath before.
Well, I also think that people need to, our industry, if our goal, and we'll get into this later in the conversation, our opportunity for our industry is to grow. It's not to keep on taking clients from one another. So if we see each other as agencies and media operators as competitor in that sense, which of course there's always going to be some of that, but the opportunity outside of our channels and what we're trying to break into with CPG or pharma or whatever to try to make our channel valuable and usable for what they're trying to do, that growth far exceeds anything that we're currently doing. But that is the competitor term is challenging, and we do have to figure out how to work better together with everyone. And so that's one of the other things that we're doing, which is having more conversations with people, finding out, okay, what are your use cases? What do you need? How can we help you? Those conversations are being had with people on first glance would say, well, aren't you guys competitors? It's like, well, no, like we can split up who's doing what, or we can help you in this way, because we're all, like the inventory, again, perfect example. We're all doing that. Help us create a more open source project of inventory auditing. And that's another conversation that came up recently. We were down in Washington. The OAAA had a summer innovations camp, and talking about the IAB work. Leslie Lee from Vistar talked about how the universal ID is a huge need. That's another thing. And this code gets back to standards. Is we can't automate things if there isn't a standard. We can't match IDs on everything. So we've already amassed like 1.2 million out-of-home media assets in our database. It's a good start. I know that there's still plenty more out there, and all different sectors are growing. So making that as accessible as possible to as many people will help our organization sort of build that initial foundation. So that's exciting.
Yeah, and to your point around that, we have a lot of incredible out-of-home automation and programmatic point solutions. We also have, I think, Google just made its big hype buzz that it's moving into the out-of-home space through DV360. Trade Desk has been constantly discussing and iterating its platform to move in. Right? These platforms need an ID to trade off of. It can't be proprietary in every case and customized in every case. Brands don't work that way. Brands use whatever platform the brand wants to use in many cases, and you need to be accessible across all. So the idea of that universal inventory database and growing from 1.2 to, I don't know, 2.2, whatever that sufficient target really is going to be essential. It's how we're going to move into that omni-channel ecosystem that you were describing, instead of staying in sort of in that out-of-home box and out-of-home budget box. Right. And I think we can talk about the idea of growing out-of-home budgets overall. But if the idea is to go, I hate the idea of screen agnostic. It takes away all the value that out-of-home brings. It takes away our scale. It takes away our locations. It takes away our context. But if you are going to look in a place where you're open to more screens as part of your buy, that's essential. If you want to know what you're actually getting, you need that. And so the idea that I think a lot of people overlook that piece of what Geopath does is we always focus on measurement. And I will ask you about that, I promise, for everyone who wants to hear about measurement in 30 seconds. But the inventory audit piece is an essential part of how we move forward as an industry. That ID, that cornerstone to any transaction that is increasingly going to happen through automated platforms, is just essential to getting right.
Yeah, so a couple of things about that and other forms of measurement, or just measurement in general. One of the other things in this conversation with standards is there's lots of different types of measurement. Go back 20 years ago, people were like, well, what's my number? It was your DEC. That was your one number, and you had one number every year. Now it's like, okay, well, what was my traffic? What was my dwell time? What was my circulation? What was my pedestrian circulation? What was the audience impression number? And then there's other things that, to your point of like, there's base level transactional things that people will be able to agree on up to a certain point. And then you start getting into, I don't know, other qualitative things like attention and attitude and recall and purchase and all those other things. And that's where, again, omni-channel goals for some of the brands that are not spending enough money in out of home, they're very data driven. They're looking to change from like a 1% increase or a 0.5% increase. And they'll do, if you can show that that works, that'll open up a floodgate. But we need to make sure that we have those standardized metrics along that rung of all the different media metrics that, you know, buyers and you know, analysts use to understand the efficacy and ROI of out of home.
So let's get into that. I'm going to use the phrase that I think you heard a million times during the Vision Project, which is we need to get the count right.
Getting the count right.
I think getting the count right. So can you address getting the count right?
Yes. So getting the count right. And this is something, you know, there's a lot of new technology that we've brought to the industry over the years, some fantastic innovation, but there is also a lot of change that happens with that. So with change and with all this innovation, there's some instability. And so there have been challenges in the past, and we have been said, get the number right, get reach and frequency right, get the number right, get transit out the door. I hear that at least every day. I wake up, I hear it in my sleep. That is what we're focusing on. And I think one of the approaches that we're implementing here is around validation, because the numbers will change. We're getting into a future with more near real-time data. That means that the number is constantly going to be changing. But how do I know that the number is correct? And when we talk about getting the number right, that's where our focus is around validation work. How are we determining whether or not it is right? And when we started changing that conversation with our working groups and our committees into, okay, we all agree we want the right number. How are we defining what is right? And moving towards that and then continuing to build that validation work. So we also want to make sure that we, as these changes are coming, getting prepared for this future. I'm not talking about next year. I'm talking about the year after that and the year after that. We need to make sure that we have the systems in place, that we have the correct baseline, the correct number to then build on top of. And so that's our priority right now. And I know there's plenty of people out there that are feel like it's not coming fast enough. But again, getting back to we need to get the number right. I'm not going to put a number out that's not right and defensible and valid. So we're working all hands on deck to make sure that that's happening. And we're trying to get more hands on deck too. That's the other challenge around this.
So for anyone who's less familiar, Geopath is a pretty lean organization. That corner that Dylan's sitting in with the nice blue wall, that's about a quarter of the office. So no, sorry, probably not quite that, but just for anyone.
There's 4 of us.
If you ever want to look at the Geopath staff plan, it's pretty compact, and you guys definitely bat. I think the expression is you punch above your weight class, you bat above something. I don't actually remember, but to getting the count right, you mentioned a few things.
What we've done with the resources that we have.
Awesome.
But it is something that, again, going to the future vision of this organization, and if you are viewing sort of that base level audience impression as a currency for transactional purposes, it needs to have the qualities of a good currency, which is scalability, stability, easily transferable, easily divisible. So like that, all those things are what we're focusing on, and that requires, talented people and good infrastructure. So we're making sure we also are implementing best practices when it comes to change management. We recently hired a new product manager, head of product here, Chris Lucan, great person, very disciplined. And that's something that when I was in the product role, I knew what I wanted to do, and seeing Chris do that now, I'm very, very happy to see that. Yeah, it's good. So I feel like there's been some great change moving forward, but it is, like I said at the beginning of the call, it's intense.
So I get it, but I'm going to go back because I think you might have scared the hell out of whoever's listening when you said, not thinking about next year, but the year after that and the year after that. For next year, let's start there, right? I'm not even starting in 22. Let's at least talk about 23. You mentioned a few things. We've talked about getting the count right. We've talked about reach frequency. You brought up transit. What can we look forward to in some short order cadence for 2023?
So the first thing that we're going to be focusing on, there's 3 things we're focusing on: the 2023 forecast, reach and frequency, and transit. So we've been reviewing with the transit media operators most of the year, those base level metrics, how we get to the valid count. I think we're in a good spot, but everything really is behind reach and frequency right now. When it comes to the 2023 numbers, we're going to be sending out in the next, probably, it's the last week of the summer, probably in the next 4 to 6 weeks, base level impressions for media operators to look at, so they can see this is what last year was, this is what this year is, and this is what next year is. That's really important. Again, just to make sure that people understand what is the change being expected. If we are seeing change, is it valid? Going back to the validity of it. If we can confirm, no, this is actually the valid count, then we don't need to worry about, well, why was the number this 2 years ago? It's like, I can't answer that question right now. We are focusing on why is this number correct. We understand that there are changes, and we'll help anybody with as much as we can with that. But we really need to make sure that we're focusing forward. If we are focusing on the validity of the data and the outputs, we need to move forward. So base level audience metrics, and then a lot of it around the API stability. So that's another front that we're working on to make sure is robust, to make sure that the deployment goes smoothly this fall and into the 4th quarter. And then with transit, all of that's going to be rolled into that 2023 forecast. So coming toward the end of this year, you'll see all of that rolled into one, addressing all of the get the numbers right questions that we've been getting. And we're working with our committees, our task force, to make sure that the materials that we put out, what's changed, why does it matter, or what's changed and why is it right? I think that's a big thing. So a lot of it's going to be around communication, around education this fall and into the winter as the new numbers are coming out.
So improved accuracy, broader range of media with the inclusion of fleet transit, and then stemming from the same accurate measurement, improved reach frequency. So
Right.
we've got those three things to look forward to, and I now sound like an infomercial, so I'm going to go back to asking questions. But
3 easy payments of, yeah.
I'm not even, you say 3 easy payments, someone just threw a question about dues in the chat, and no, we're not going there right now.
No, but that is
so-
something that we are trying to figure out, and we'll more information to follow in the next couple months on that.
Fair. All right, and then so let's call that the short term, and I think it's a pretty aggressive short term. It explains what's keeping you busy right now.
Yeah.
I also don't think it's an ending short term, right? It
No.
sounds like all things where there is an ongoing piece to getting better as we move. And there's also other areas to touch on, right? You really, I think one of the points you made earlier that we talked about was interoperability. That's not the next 4 to 6 weeks. That is an ongoing piece. So what is your forward-looking roadmap coming out of the Vision project?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of that is to have those conversations now to find out what those needs are so that we can build toward it. Again, going back to sort of the product roadmap, looking at what do we need to do in the next 3 months? What do we need to do in the next 6 months, 18 months, 2 years? There are the imperative foundations. So if we talk about where is this release coming up, the 2023 release, I expect will be the last annualized forecast that we provide to the industry, right? And so an annualized forecast, the data in there represents an average week of the year. But going back to all the learnings throughout 2020 and the data that we now have know exist and know can answer that question as sort of a near real-time observed data, our goal is to then move from a annual, you've heard me refer to it as the Farmer's Almanac of Measurement, to an actual ongoing rolling weather report. So here is your forecast for the next 12, 13 months. And this is, you can still always roll it up to an annualized average. So you can make sure you understand what that baseline is, but numbers are going to change. But that's also a huge change management problem that our industry needs to solve. So we're not going to do that without making sure that everyone knows how to do it. And also making sure that enough people have had the lead time to then change their infrastructure to operate and transact that way. And that may take a very long time. But if we are going to be involved in omni-channel, that is, again, going back to the speed of business, that's sort of the granularity that people expect information to be changing and for the information to come in. So I think that that's going to be the competitive landscape of information that are going to be table stakes, I think are going that direction. So,
great. And this is,
yeah.
sorry, but this is where we're going to look to our friends at the OAAA and at the DPAA to talk to your memberships. And a lot of us who are on here are members of 1, 2, or 3, or hell, 4 different groups without even remembering what the 4th could be. That's an industry-wide question. It's great that Geopath can build a flexible solution that can update, I'm making it up, quarterly, monthly, weekly, daily. That's going to wreak a little havoc without us coming together as an industry and understanding how we use these numbers, how we talk about them, how frequently we update. You can imagine giving someone an impression estimate on Tuesday, having it change on Wednesday, and then having a lot of explaining to do. So these are the sorts of things that I think we need to tackle as an industry sooner than later to be prepared for that omni-channel future that, quite frankly, is here, but that we need to get on top of and ahead of.
Right. And we're not going to get there unless we get the numbers right today, because we again, moving forward with rapidly changing information, you need to make sure that it's valid constantly. So focusing on the validity of the work that we're going to be delivering now is then allowing that baseline to continue and build on that foundation. But it is exciting. It's a little terrifying. But the other thing that I think was really important coming out of the conversations is if Geopath doesn't do it, then someone else will, and then we'll have 45 different measurements that may or may not have universal scope, and we'll probably have a lot of nuance to it, and you're not necessarily going to be able to combine them. So you're still going to spend 40 times amount of time to try to reconcile all those things. So whatever the future may hold for the diversity of insights, it's still going to be people looking to Geopath to reconcile those, bring those together, and provide that base level audience impression number to its members across all of the environments that it measures in out of home, and out of home is growing all the time. You know, the sector is expected to grow 9% over the next 5 years versus 5% for the rest of the media industry. That's exciting. So I feel like there's so much that has been upended over the past 2 years of what the norm was, but that the new norm is constantly changing. But that also puts a priority on more near real-time data. The question of Geopath went from what's going to happen next year, what's my number, to what's happening right now, and what's happening right now, and what about now? And those questions are not just coming from curiosity. Clients are saying, I need to know what's happening.
Yep. Look, I agree with everything you said, except for the part about 9% being exciting. We need to grow a hell of a lot faster. We deserve to grow a hell of a lot more than 9%. And I know 9% sounds aggressive compared to overall media.
If you look at other countries, I mean, that's not unheard of at all. You know,
the 9%
out of home is 10 to 20% in other markets.
Absolutely.
So we certainly, I think we deserve
which means
a lot
we
more.
have room to double, triple, quadruple here. So yeah, when I say 9% is not exciting, it's, you know, I think in the past, maybe it was deemed really aggressive and great. I think in the scope of what we could do as an industry, if we're happy with 9%, we've shorted ourselves tremendously compared to where we could go.
So for that potential growth, if it's not 9%, we'll say it's 9 plus, whatever that multiple is.
Can we put everyone on the spot for 100% growth in a couple of years? That's probably aggressive, but we can just keep it in the back of our heads.
What Geopath is focusing on is, I don't want to get in the way of anybody doing that. And I think that's kind of the other points that's come out, is that people need to grow rapidly. They need information on an immediate cadence. And Geopath, as sort of that base level metric, needs to fill that role and have, you know, high uptime and best in class data. So that's what we're looking to build. And that's exciting, because then it'll put the innovations on the groups that are doing things outside of the scope of base level audience measurement.
I'll challenge you on that to go one step further. It's nice to make sure you're not an impediment. It's better to be a utility driver. And by that, I mean, you started the vision conversation, 40 minutes ago by saying you looked at what the industry needed and outlining 4 things the industry needs to grow, right? Specifically with a focus on what out-of-home needs to grow. And that's whether it's local or national, whatever it is, what kind of things do we need? And you've come up with accuracy and inventory and all these other pieces. Look, selfishly, from my perspective, and I'm only a little facetious when I throw out those sort of growth numbers, because I really do believe that as an industry, I don't want to say we're entitled to it, but damn, we should have it. There are things we need to grow, and accuracy is the baseline, but it's how we use these. So one of the places is, Geopath has recently been able to develop a set of national reach curves. Now, for anyone on here who goes, great, every channel has national reach curves, big deal. Ours didn't really. And I know this is being worked on by a few different parties right now. But these reach curves feed the media models that brands use and brands and agencies use, especially the national scale ones, whether it's through MMM or syndicated services or proprietary tools like some of the ones we have here within Group M, to determine how much money they're pouring into each channel, right? And our inclusion has already, it's been fantastic. So just to give you sort of the what we're doing with this new information and some of the things that Geopath has put out, right? We've incorporated these reach curves into 2 different proprietary Group M models that they're using to determine budget allocations for their brands. Now, some of these brands have run out of home before, have even run some attribution, but then you get around to the next year cycle where they're going through planning again, and the budget allocation tool has no baseline, because frankly, we ran attribution on, let's call it, even if we got 6 or low 7 figures, it's a brand that spends 100 million. So it's kind of, what the hell are we talking about with that? Right. But we've now been able, you'd go into the model, it wouldn't have out of home. You'd be at 0 again, unless someone over there liked you and thought, hey, let's throw them a few bucks. Right now, we're looking at it as we're in the model and we're running scenarios, and we're seeing scenarios across various types of CPG, food brands, national auto, retail, right? A bunch of different categories as we're running these, and out of home's popping, and it's popping at a good measure. So we started with the national average, right? Let's play around at 4%. By the way, among national advertisers, I'm pretty sure the out of home number is probably about half that, especially as we bounce back from 2020, hopefully growing a lot more. But we started at 4%. All right, let's tweak it up to 5 or 6. Let's tweak it up to 10. Let's keep going. I mean, hopefully no one is surprised at what was found, but I think a lot of the people on the agency and client sides were really pleasantly surprised to see that out of home contributed tremendously to these models. And it's something that they just never had available before. And when they say, what is that? Why? I think we have to go back to, we're one of the last mass reach channels out there. And frankly, for however horrendous it may have been a bunch of years back to try and buy a true national footprint and piece together multiple partners, that got a lot easier. Again, automation and programmatic have made that really feasible. So we are a national channel. We're not a series of locals together, right? I'm not by any way dismissing the huge amount of local business that is probably half or more of our industry, right? We need that to survive. But a lot of our growth is going to be able to come from these national businesses that have never invested before and are now saying, oh my God, if I just went with a baseline spend, it's going to be a tremendous difference in our industry outlook without necessarily, right? It's going to be additive for them. It's going to be incremental reach that they have not seen with the fragmentation of video into all different forms, with ad blocking, with all these other things coming through, where I just think we've been overlooked and underthought of as a national reach player. So I'm really excited to see that come forward as we keep improving the metrics and analytics and bring that reach frequency capability down to a market level. I think you're going to see this improvement and increase as we keep running the models, as we keep pushing our way forward, capitalize on work done, the OAAA working group on MMM and MTA, and lots of others that are out there trying to push us forward. These are the pieces that are going to hopefully do it. And this is why I say 9% is a lousy number. It sounds good to the street, maybe. It sounds horrible, I think, to me, knowing that we can truly take leaps, not steps. Sorry, that was my high horse.
No, I'm thrilled that you're so excited about it. And you and I have been this has been sort of like our pet project to answer these questions for you. And we're equipped to answer it. Again, going back to March of 2020, Matthew Martimo from MotionWorks and I on the phone at 5 o'clock in the morning, trying to figure out what's happening in the real world. Does the data make sense? And this is the fruit of all of that investment. And good data, great partners like them have helped us figure out what is the need for our industry to then get it into the right hands, to iterate, test it. Again, having trusted partners like Michael and Corinne over at Kinetic have been amazing to get that there and iterate through that. And I think that what we now are able to stand behind, again, with good validation work, is these numbers are correct. And so this is the first time there's been, like you said, there's been out of home reach curves in those media allocation tools or those media channel network allocation optimization tools, but they were not for everyone. And we're now putting all of the benefits of all that work that happened over here is now opening this door. And so the attribution groups that, again, Geopath doesn't necessarily have any role in that, other than making sure that we have good geofences for people if they want to use them as, or view sheds if they want to use them as geofences or whatever it may be, to connect inventory to their first party data to then understand, did it work? But what we're trying to build now is this high level of, okay, let's go from the top down, the planners, make sure that they have good empirical information that's valid, that makes a case for out of home. And that's huge. I mean, when you came back and you showed me what you were able to confidently pitch in front of some of your clients, I was like, this is what we've been waiting for. So yeah, I feel like the closed loop of learning from outcome measurement to planning to continual audience measurement, that's gonna, I really feel, build momentum, and we're gonna see a lot of return for the industry. And my job is to figure out now how to make sure that that foundation is as stable and sustainable as possible.
Yeah. Small job, that's okay.
Small job. All right, we got some other questions, yep. But we're probably not going to have another one of these fireside chats. Well, maybe we will in the fall, but you're coming up in December, will be your 1 year as chairperson. What if you originally did not come from the out-of-home sector? What have you learned in the past 9 months as chair of Geopath that you're like, holy, what? Good things.
No, I think, I was going to say, I think it is good things. Like, first, yeah, I didn't come from an out-of-home background, but, and I said this, when it first came up about the role, it was really an honor to be considered and accepted in as part of the industry in this sort of capacity, because I didn't come from here. I had to learn a lot. There are plenty of people in my own organization at Kinetic who could probably spin circles around me when it comes to out of home and knowledge of consumer behavior and media owners and habits and just everything about it. But I appreciate that hopefully what I've been able to bring and show is valuable, and that I can at least come in with enthusiasm and be part of this amazing industry. So there's that, and I still feel that way a year in, which is kind of nice because kind of figure a year in, you take a few punches. But I think what's really encouraging is, and we've seen it going back to the conference in May, going back even before then, there's a unification to the industry. There's an idea that we are all in this together. There's the idea that we need to collaborate and come forward together as an industry. And I think that's the key. It's, I really hope everyone's individual business does fantastically well. I look at it as, how do we grow out of home, right? My job at Kinetic is to sell out of home. It's period, end of story. I need to grow investment in out of home. That's how we will grow. That's how we will do fantastically well. Selfishly, it's how I do right by my people here, but it's how do we grow out of home? And I think that what I've seen across our entire ecosystem, whether it's media owners, tech providers, whoever it is, there's this sense that that's the conversation. It's no longer about, how do I just improve my standing? How do I sell one extra this? It's how the heck do we sell out of home? Right? It's one thing to sell one unit. It's another thing to sell 1 million, and your one fills up over and over again from that million because we've grown out of home. And I think it's been a unified call, and it's been great to see. And I just hope we all continue on that path, because it's been the most gratifying part of being in this business, is seeing everyone come together the last couple of years. And let's face it, now that I don't want to say we're recovered, but now that we've bounced back to a new baseline that just happens to look a lot like our pre-pandemic baseline, we've got to keep that going, right? And to your point, it can't be trying to steal one or two things here or there from somebody else. It's got to be, how do we grow out of home? How do we turn 6 figures to 7 to 8 to 9? I would say, even if you look at some of the largest out of home spenders as a percentage of their portfolio, they're probably low compared to where they should be. How do we keep making the case, keep driving forward, and keep growing investment? And that's how I look at my participation in Geopath. How do I keep advocating for those tools and getting you the resource that Geopath needs to keep providing those so that we can grow? And then looking at sort of going back to my day job, my other day job, how do we then take those tools and platforms and bring investment forward? Let's take 7 minutes of questions. Scott, what do we got?
Yes, so there's a couple of questions, and this first one goes back to some of the earlier conversation, right? And even some of the more recent about accelerating growth for the industry. And just some thoughts around that and how you probably to Dylan, how do you see that happening? Do you think publishing more of our methodologies or algorithms would help facilitate that growth or help facilitate that interoperability that you're talking about? Just any thoughts around that?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that I always cringe whenever someone says it is like Geopath's a black box. I hate hearing that. I don't want us to be a black box. I want to be trusted. I want us to be, and to do that, we need to prove that the data that we're providing is valid, and transparency is key in that. And I also think, so I guess to answer the immediate question, yes, we need to share more. We need to document more and share the documentation publicly. That's can be a little scary if you're talking about things that some would consider, trade secrets or whatever. But our foundational role and the work that we provide for our members, the more that we expose of the granular data and how some of that data is derived or related with one another, is going to open up for ways of optimizing out-of-home spend that we could only dream of. We've been providing a number in the years past, and now we're providing 168 numbers with different hourly metrics throughout the week. That's part of the data we provide today. But behind that is traffic and circulation, dwell time, and all these other components. To send that all through an API call is a little bit much. And so, in the interest of standardization, of getting people to move toward thinking about transacting and audience metrics, we move toward that. And that's good. And we're going to continue to do that because we need to make sure that people can ask very specific questions and get very specific answers back consistently. But all of that underlying data itself, when accessed in whole, that data are incredibly valuable because it's contextual, and you can start asking questions and finding patterns that you couldn't. One person couldn't do that. And so this is where machine learning or whatever sort of algorithms people end up developing to optimize stuff. I see that being a huge future for out-of-home players to start being in that game. But to do that, we have to trust one another. We have to have good protocols on how to share data, good data compliance, and that's what we're trying to figure out, how to best support that. But going back again to the answer, yes, I think we need to share more of what we do. There's a lot of fantastic stuff that we've been doing. We have groundbreaking eye tracking work that we conducted back in 2002, over 400 hours of eye tracking video, hand coded all of this work. And that's the foundation of us being able to understand, okay, given this speed, dwell time, this size of unit, this proximity, this orientation, this placement within the field of view of the audience, they're likely to note it. That's media consumption. And that works great, but I don't think we talk about it enough. We always just talk about the one metric, use this one number, but I think all of the work that goes into it, frankly, really exciting if people want to. It's not exciting for everybody, but I'd be more than happy to dive into the details. And so I think making more of it available for those people that want to keep digging and understand more, I think that's good.
Great. And just want to, one kind of question came in here. It's written as a statement, but I'm going to paraphrase it as a question. So love the roadmap and everything you've all been talking about. Question about reach and frequency, right? We've talked a lot about it, in the press and amongst ourselves, and you talked about it here today. What would you say to somebody that needs assurances on how do I know it's going to be right? What is right? We've talked a lot about getting the number right, but what does that really mean? And how do we assure people that it is right?
Sure. So I guess it goes back to what I was saying earlier, is that focusing on validity of the data, why is it valid, is the first question that we need to ask with whether or not the process and the methods are accurate and the data is, can answer that question. So with, for example, like with traffic data, for vehicular traffic data, if we're trying to understand the traffic volume and traffic reach and frequency, being able to look at continuous counting stations from like DOTs, sensors that are, toll booths or whatever it may be, you're getting a constant stream of data every single hour, every single day for the past 4 years. We know exactly how many cars are on that one particular roadway going that one particular direction. Now that data is not available everywhere, but for enough places where that data is available, we then compare what we're observing from the methods that we have of interpreting mobile location data, trips, et cetera, and comparing it to those ground truths and seeing how they align. And if they don't, we need to figure out why, continue to improve that. But what we're seeing now is that our ability to use mobile location data and understand how the full population moves, even if that is a sample of the full population, that mobile location data, it is still capable of predicting and estimating the traffic volumes on the roadway within a very acceptable margin of error. Now, going into reach and frequency, if we can understand the volume of trips on one particular day, and we have the same devices over a period of time, then you can draw the conclusion that I can understand the trip frequency over time. And if you know the representativeness of those people and those devices that you're observing, you can also estimate the total reach. So TRPs equals reach times frequency. But what we're doing now, which is different than before, because we have access to this raw location data, movement data with our partners, is that we can check each side of that triangle for something that we would consider valid. And so we're building in a little bit more redundancy into it. And this wasn't at our fingertips when we built our last reach and frequency model. We have this now. And so what you will be seeing, and again, this goes back to with the 2023 release, we have all of these things that we're addressing to get the numbers right. In addition with that, working with our committees and task force, we have support documents that we're constantly going through this narrative of, okay, these are the questions I'm going to be asked. Okay, well, let's make sure we answer these questions to satisfaction so that people feel that it is accurate, that it is valid, and that they can also walk away from the conversation with Geopath, go back to their clients and put it in their own words and make sure that their clients trust them. I want you to be able to answer that question.
And Dylan, I want to stress that last part, right? There's the Geopath team and data partners and a lot of the science that goes behind this in terms of what they're doing. But a lot of this is the people out there and our peers across the industry who are reviewing and saying this makes sense, or even just looking and saying, you know what, this reach model, I'm making this up, I think based on some past conversations, reach model assumes an even distribution across the whole market, but no one ever buys an even distribution across the whole market. We buy key areas, neighborhoods, audiences, but those audiences do tend to cluster in certain spots. You don't buy even distribution. So how do we rethink what the model is? This has all been peer reviewed, even if not down to the level of the mathematics of it, but to a level of, does this make sense? Does this hit common sense? And then that was used to inform sort of those FAQs that I imagine will come forward when the reach frequency is updated. So hopefully, whether it's reach frequency or the count or other products, there's confidence behind them that this has been an industry group, not simply Geopath in a box, but that it has been opened up to a larger number of people for review to make sure that this makes sense.
Great, thank you. And thank you, I know we're at the top of the hour, and thank you to everybody for staying on an extra few minutes. If you do still have questions, feel free to send them to geekout@geopath.org. We'll get them answered for you. We're always here to help out and to answer any questions. I want to say thank you to Michael and to Dylan. I was engaged. I thought it was a great conversation. Hope everybody that joined thought it was a great conversation as well. This session will be available on our website in the Geek Out tab by tomorrow. And again, feel free to reach out with any questions, and thank you again. Appreciate
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Brian. And thanks everybody for attending.
Thank you, Dylan. Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Brian. And thanks, everybody.
it.
Talk to y'all soon.
Take care. Enjoy the rest of your summer.
Yes.